There is a version of you that walks into a room and opportunity finds them, not because they visualize harder or affirmed longer, but because they occupy a different identity position than the one you currently hold. And the gap between those two positions is not what you think it is. Most people who study Neville have practiced being lucky. They've done the sessions, they've affirmed it, visualized it, scripted it, and for a few days it works. Synchronicities pile up, green lights, perfect timing, unexpected wins, then it evaporates. They return to what feels like normal probability. No visible pattern, no explanation. The problem is not the technique. The problem is that you practice the identity for 20 minutes and then spend the next 23 hours unconsciously occupying a different one. And that second identity is the one externalizing. By the end of this video, you will know exactly where your practiced state and your default state diverge, and why one of them always wins. To understand why that happens, I want to show you a story from Neville's own life, not because it's inspiring, but because it reveals the exact mechanism most people miss. December 1933. Neville was living in New York City. He wanted to visit his family in Barbados for Christmas, but he had no money for the trip. He went to his teacher Abdullah and told him the situation. Abdullah looked at him and said, "You are in Barbados, not you will be in Barbados, not imagine going to Barbados. You are in Barbados." That night, Neville went to bed in his apartment in New York and imagined he was already in Barbados, not imagining the trip, not visualizing the airplane or the ocean or the arrival. He imagined from Barbados. He fell asleep, assuming he was already there, in his family's home, the trip complete. He did this every night. Within days, he received a letter from his brother offering to pay for the voyage. Shortly after, unexpected money came through that covered the rest. He spent Christmas in Barbados. Most people hear that story and think the technique was the imaginal act before sleep. They're wrong. That's not what made it work. The power wasn't in the 20-minute session before bed. It was in the identity Neville occupied between those sessions. He didn't spend his waking day as Neville in New York hoping to go to Barbados. He spent it as Neville who is in Barbados, a person for whom the trip was already done. That's not a visualization, that's an identity he wore all day. The technique was just the rehearsal, the state was the active ingredient, and this is where the manifestation roller coaster starts for most people. Here's a pattern I've watched repeat with student after student. Someone wants to become the kind of person who experiences consistent luck. They do the work, they practice SATs, they affirm "I am lucky" every morning. They script fortunate outcomes. For 3 days, maybe a week, it works brilliantly. Synchronicities pile up, they find money on the street, someone offers them an opportunity out of nowhere. A problem resolves itself with no effort. Then it stops. The luck evaporates. They're back to what feels like normal probability. They assume the technique failed, or their belief wasn't strong enough, so they try again. Same cycle. It works, then it doesn't. No visible pattern. Here's what I see happening in every single case. They practice the identity of the lucky one during the session. For that window, maybe 15 or 20 minutes, the identity felt real. But the moment they stood up, checked their phone, hit traffic, opened their inbox, they unconsciously returned to their default identity. I am someone managing obstacles. I am someone who has to try hard for good outcomes. I am someone reacting to circumstances. That identity ran unmonitored for the rest of the day, and that identity is the one that externalized. It's not that the lucky identity was weak, it's that the unlucky identity was stronger because it ran in the background unchallenged. But there's a specific moment during your day where that split is most destructive. It's not where you'd expect. I'll show you exactly where that moment lives in a few minutes, because missing it is the single reason technique quality doesn't correlate with results. So let's pull apart what Neville actually taught about identity, not as a technique, but as the foundation underneath all technique. In his book Your Faith is Your Fortune, published in 1941, Neville writes that "I am" is the only causative agent in your world, not a deity external to you, your consciousness of being. Every statement following "I am" is a creative declaration that shapes experience. When you say I am lucky or I am unlucky, you are not describing, you are offering. Most people use I am unconsciously dozens of times daily, naming themselves into limitation. I am tired. I am broke. I am unlucky. Each one is a creative act, and because it's unconscious, it carries full conviction. In The Power of Awareness, published in 1952, Neville goes further. He says that desire is not longing, it's identity unrecognized. When you desire to be wealthy, healthy, or successful, you are not lacking those things. You are currently occupying the identity of one who lacks them, and the desire is consciousness trying to alert you to the identity you must assume instead. The wish fulfilled is not a future outcome you visualize, it's a present tense identity shift. You don't imagine having luck. You imagine from the position of being the person for whom luck is baseline normal. And here's the part most teachers skip. Neville taught in his 1948 lectures that you cannot feel yourself to be one thing in your inner conversations and another thing during technique. The identity you occupy in reaction, when someone cuts you off in traffic, when you check your bank balance, when you read bad news, is the one that externalizes, because it's the one you occupy unconsciously, and therefore with full conviction. Conscious technique is weak compared to unconscious identity. Now, let me correct something you've heard 100 times. Most LOA teachers will tell you that feeling means getting into a high vibration emotional state, joy, gratitude, excitement. They'll tell you to feel the thrill of being lucky. That's not what Neville taught. That's not even close. In Feeling is the Secret, published in 1944, Neville defines feeling as the acceptance of an idea as true, not emotion, acceptance. To feel lucky is not to generate excitement or positivity. It's to accept as self evident and requiring no proof that you are the kind of person to whom fortunate things happen naturally. This acceptance is quiet, not effortful. A lucky person doesn't try to feel lucky during a visualization. They simply don't question it, the same way you don't question your own name. If you've been chasing emotional highs during your practice sessions, you've been chasing the wrong thing. Now, here's the counterintuitive part. The people who learn this directly from Neville's actual recordings know a detail about inner conversation monitoring that's been stripped out of every modern course. It's the detail that separates practitioners who hold state for 3 days from those who hold it for 3 months. I'm going to show you that detail now. If you want to go deeper on how to identify where your practice state and your default state diverge, I've built a free diagnostic that walks through the exact structure for this. It's in the description. It's not a quiz, it's a mapping tool, and it will show you the specific moments your identity shifts without you noticing. Now let's talk about application. How do you actually occupy an identity across a full day, not just during a session? Here's exactly what to do starting tonight. First, before you go to sleep, revise your day. This comes from Neville's lecture The Pruning Shears of Revision from 1951. Go back through the events of your day and mentally rewrite any moment that contradicted the identity of the lucky one. Not to erase bad events, but to claim authorship. A person who believes they are at the mercy of circumstances does not revise, they replay and ruminate. A person who believes I am the one imagining all of this revises naturally because they recognize no event has power over them except the power they gave it by accepting it as fact. Second, monitor your inner conversations tomorrow. This is not about policing every thought. It's about noticing when you speak from scarcity, comparison, or complaint. Those are identity leaks. Every time you catch yourself saying, I never get lucky, or things are hard for me, or I have to fight for everything, you've just named yourself into that identity. Neville taught in his lectures from the 1950s that your inner conversations reveal who you believe yourself to be. They are not idle chatter, they are causative. Here's the detail I mentioned. The moment that matters most isn't when you catch yourself in negative self talk, it's the 3 seconds after you catch it. Most people notice the leak, feel bad about it, and then continue the same inner conversation while criticizing themselves for having it. That's two identity declarations stacked. the original leak, and the identity of someone who can control their thoughts. The correction is surgical. You catch the statement, you don't judge it, you replace it with the identity you're installing. That's the detail. No guilt, just replacement. Third, apply the naturalness test. Most people celebrate every small win like it's a miracle. That tells you everything. A lucky person doesn't celebrate small wins, they barely notice them because fortune is their normal. If you're still surprised when good things happen, you're not occupying the identity yet. You're visiting it. Actually, let me reframe that. You're performing it. And performances end. Neville said in Out of This World, published in 1949, that an assumption, if sustained, will harden into fact. But most people abandon the assumption the moment they encounter contradictory evidence. The contradiction is not evidence the assumption failed. It's old causation externalizing. And the test of whether the new identity is load bearing is whether you can maintain it when your senses scream the opposite. Nothing here requires talent, it requires attention to the hours you have been ignoring. Before I show you the belief bridge, there's one thing about your baseline state, what your subconscious is doing in the first 60 seconds after you wake up, that determines whether any of this sticks. It's the variable that separates people who get results in 2 weeks from people who never do. I'll address that now. Now, here's the part that determines whether this works for 3 days or 3 years. What we just covered, the revision, the inner conversation shift, the naturalness test, that's roughly 1 hour of conscious practice, but you live the rest of the day. And in those hours, your attention drifts. You scroll, you react, you compare, you plan from lack. Every moment you spend unconsciously occupying the old identity, you're feeding it. This is the part of Neville's teaching most people read straight past. The new state doesn't fail because you didn't believe hard enough during practice. It fails because the old state stayed active in all the moments you weren't paying attention. The architecture of a permanent identity shift isn't about perfecting the session, it's about managing the space between sessions. That's where state solidifies or dissolves. Here's the baseline state variable. The first 60 seconds after you wake, before you reach for your phone, before you check the time, your subconscious delivers an identity report. It tells you who you are. For most people, that report is I am the person who has to make things happen today. That's the unlucky identity reasserting itself before you've even opened your eyes. If you let that report run unchallenged, every technique you do later that day is building on top of the wrong foundation. The correction is simple. Before you move, before you think about your day, you occupy the identity of the lucky one for 10 seconds. That's the foundation. Everything else builds from there. And that's exactly what the diagnostic in the description helps you map. The reason luck comes and goes isn't that the universe is testing you or that your belief wasn't strong enough. It's that you built a new identity during practice and then dismantled it across the rest of your day without noticing. The lucky version of you exists for 20 minutes. The unlucky version exists for the rest, and the one that externalizes is the one you occupy longest. You don't need a better technique, you need to stop feeding the identity you're trying to leave behind. Seeing this is the easy half. You can already feel which of those hours is yours. The hard part is installing a state that holds across all your waking hours without collapsing the moment you hit friction. That's the work almost no one walks you through because a diagnosis is easy to give away and a protocol is not. Most teachers show you the session, they don't show you the architecture that keeps the session from evaporating the second you open your eyes. So there's a specific next step for the people who want to actually close that gap. If you want the identity shift you just practiced to survive contact with your actual day, take the source code diagnostic. It's a structured assessment that shows you the exact moments your default state reasserts itself and which triggers pull you back into the old identity. It's free. The link is in the description below this video. Tonight, before you sleep, revise one moment from today where you reacted from the unlucky identity. Rewrite it as the lucky one would have experienced it, not to fix the event, to claim authorship over it. Neville taught in his 1948 lecture series that the world is a mirror, reflecting the being you are assuming yourself to be. not the being you hope to become, the being you are occupying right now, in this moment, reading this sentence. You don't attract luck, you are it, or you're not. And the difference isn't what you do for an hour, it's who you are the other 23.